There are times in life when someone walks away, and it feels like everything inside us starts to fall apart. The person who once replied to our messages, who looked at us with warmth, who made us feel seen and important, is suddenly no longer there, and we are left standing there, caught in a silent storm of questions. What did I do wrong? Where did I mess up? Why wasn't I good enough? This scene, though deeply personal, is much more common than we might realize, but it's rarely understood in its full emotional depth. Carl Jung, the famous Swiss psychoanalyst, saw these breaking points not as punishments but as turning points, as doorways. In fact, to him, rejection, no matter how painful, is not simply an emotional injury. It's a meaningful experience pointing us towards something much bigger. It's a chance to face who we really are beyond the relationships we think we need to define us. Jung taught that the human mind finds balance in opposites: light and shadow, acceptance and rejection, awareness and the unconscious. This wasn't about dividing life into right and wrong, but about a deeper vision of the human soul, pushing us to see all parts of ourselves. He didn't describe life as a fight between good and bad, but as a sacred dance between opposite forces that are trying to come together into a bigger, wiser whole. The shadow, the parts of ourselves we prefer to ignore, is not something to be destroyed, but something longing to be seen and welcomed. What we deny in ourselves doesn't simply disappear. It hides. It wears different faces. It eventually shows itself again, through our relationships, our choices, and especially through our wounds. Every painful experience, especially rejection, is a symbolic sign of something within us crying out for attention. It's not a coincidence that the moments which hurt the most are the ones that touch our deepest insecurities. It's not random that the people who shake us the most stir up old emotions we thought we had buried long ago. Life, in its timeless wisdom, uses these painful moments not to punish us, but to push us inward, into the unexplored parts of our mind and heart that we haven't yet claimed. Rejection is not the universe stamping us as not good enough. Most often, it's a signal, a message, that there are parts of ourselves we have neglected or forgotten. Maybe we pinned our sense of worth onto someone else, hoping they would make us feel valuable from the outside. Maybe we ignored our true needs because we were afraid of losing a connection. Maybe we built our whole identity on shaky ground, shaped by the expectations of others and the wounds we were too afraid to face. But when rejection steps in, those structures start to crumble, and it's through those very cracks that consciousness can finally pour in. Instead of treating our pain like a mistake that needs quick fixing, Jung invites us to explore the deeper meaning of the experience. He encourages us to ask, what part of me is being called to the surface? Is it my self-worth that needs to be rebuilt from within? Is it my real self begging to rise again after years of trying to please others? Is it my inner child, the most pure, raw part of me, longing to be loved without conditions? Each rejection carries a hidden message. Each emotion it awakens is a voice from the soul. Being rejected doesn't mean we are being refused by life itself. More often, it means we are being gently, or sometimes forcefully, pushed toward a vital part of ourselves we have yet to truly meet. It's an invitation to stop searching for answers outside and start looking inward, with honesty and bravery. And it's in this act of facing what hurts without judgment that true transformation begins. Real inner change starts here. When we bring into light what we used to hide in darkness, we allow a fuller, freer, more real version of ourselves to be born. The ego, as fragile as it is, longs to be loved. It craves being seen, validated, recognized by others. It builds itself based on reflections, what others think of us, how we appear, what we believe will make us deserving of love. But that's just a survival strategy. It's a way to protect ourselves from the frightening emptiness that lies underneath. Yet, if we are brave enough to walk through that emptiness, if we dare to lose the things we thought made us who we are, we may find something far greater waiting on the other side. Our true selves, no longer needing anyone else's approval, but anchored deeply in who we are. As Jung wisely pointed out, the ego is not the whole of who we are. It's just a small part. Beneath the ego lies the soul, a deeper, wiser, unconscious dimension. The soul doesn't care about admiration. It hungers for wholeness. It's not chasing applause, trophies, or titles. What it longs for is a truth that can't be traded or changed to fit anyone else's standards. This is why, when rejection hits and the ego starts to crack, something ancient and sacred inside of us wakes up. The soul stirs. And suddenly, rejection is no longer just a wound. It becomes a doorway, a mysterious gate inviting us to leave behind our surface identities and dive into the hidden depth of who we really are. It is in these painful moments, when everything outside starts falling apart, that we can finally turn our eyes inward, not as an act of isolation, not as a way to run away, but as a path back to our true selves, a path toward real healing. Because underneath our desperate need to be liked lies a deeper need, the need to be real, not perfect, not accepted, not celebrated, just real. And instead of chasing after someone else's approval to cover up our hurt, Jung invites us to ask different questions, the kind that stretch our awareness. These questions aren't meant to provide quick fixes. They are meant to plant the seeds of deep change. What part of me has been hurt? Is it the inner child still feeling like he's not good enough? Maybe it's the carefully built image I've spent years creating, the one designed to make me more likable. Maybe it's the longing for belonging, yet again met with a closed door. To recognize which part of us has been hurt is not weakness. It's clarity. It's the first honest step in a healing journey that must begin with truth. What image of myself is now breaking apart? Could it be that the pain of rejection isn't just about what I lost on the outside, but about what's breaking down inside? Maybe I believed that if I was good enough, if I was perfect, if I shaped myself to fit what others needed, I wouldn't be left behind. Maybe I built an ideal version of myself, a mask, thinking it would guarantee acceptance. And now, facing pain, that mask is falling apart. But this collapse is not a tragedy. It's sacred. Because only when the illusion of who we thought we were dies can the truth of who we really are begin to rise. And within that unfolding comes a powerful question. What part of myself have I been sacrificing just to belong? What quality within me am I no longer willing to trade for someone else's acceptance? Here lies the secret gift hidden inside rejection. Deep within the wound, there is a new force wanting to be born, a truth that no longer wants to be silenced to earn love, a self-worth that refuses to be attached to anyone else's opinion. This kind of deep realization doesn't happen all at once. It unfolds slowly, over time. But when it does, it brings freedom. We start to reclaim ourselves. We become whole, not because everyone suddenly accepts us, but because we no longer break ourselves into pieces to be loved. Rejection, then, is not the end of the story. It becomes the beginning of a return to our inner home, where we don't have to beg for a place to belong, because we finally remember something important, our natural right to exist with dignity. Becoming someone others fear losing isn't about manipulation, charm, or emotional games. It's not about crafting a better image or learning to be more likable. It's not about perfecting the act of pleasing others. The real work, the deep, sacred work, is becoming someone we ourselves don't want to lose. And that work begins the moment we stop running from rejection and start listening to what it's trying to teach us. In Carl Jung's deep understanding, much of what we do to be noticed, loved, or admired is only the ego playing a surface game. The ego endlessly chases approval, clings to recognition, and is desperate to be someone important in others' eyes. But the soul doesn't care about any of that. The soul seeks something much deeper. It longs for wholeness, not applause. And that's why the real journey isn't about making others love us more, but about learning how to never turn our backs on ourselves again. True transformation starts not when others finally notice our value, but when we decide to stop asking to be seen. Becoming truly unforgettable has nothing to do with the need to be needed. It comes from the bravery to become essential to ourselves, to choose a life that isn't built on fear of being left, but on the fullness that grows when we fully live inside ourselves. This kind of growth doesn't happen in surface-level relationships or in the changing reactions of the world. It unfolds deep within the sacred silence of the soul, in that inner place where we start to rebuild ourselves from the very roots. Not to please others, not to fit into some outside image or meet some old standard, but to be true, to become who we really are. When someone does this, when they build themselves on a strong foundation inside instead of the shaky need for approval, something changes. Even the way the world looks at them changes. That person is no longer seen as someone who is waiting to be completed. They are seen as someone who has already found themselves. And that is what pulls others in, not with a desire to own them, but with the simple fact that something so real cannot be ignored. Those who become irreplaceable don't do it by meeting everyone's expectations. They become irreplaceable because they have gone into the deep parts of their own being and come back with a fire that only being real can create. It's clear in their eyes, in how they move, in the calm strength they carry, not afraid to be alone. There is something deeply magnetic about someone who has turned their hurt into strength and their loneliness into creative energy. Someone who has faced rejection but chooses not to hide behind pride, not to blame themselves or beg for love, but instead chooses to be reborn, unlocks a kind of energy that words can barely describe. It's not an act. It's not something fake. It's a presence, a glow, a peace that doesn't depend on others noticing it, because it rises from deep, conscious self-love. That kind of magnetism isn't a trick. It's not a skill they learned. It's the clear expression of a soul that no longer betrays itself. It's the energy of someone who has walked through pain and come out not harder, but more human, softer, freer. Only when a person dares to stay with themselves does that special light appear, the kind of light that no one wants to lose, the light of someone who has learned to love themselves without needing anything in return. In a world where so many are chasing validation, where social media rewards fake appearances, and where society feeds an endless hunger for approval, the person who approves of themselves becomes something rare and almost sacred. Carl Jung sensed this truth long ago. The more we search outside ourselves for what is missing, the further we drift from our own completeness. The soul doesn't crave popularity. It craves wholeness. It doesn't seek praise. It seeks meaning. That's why the person who stands firmly in their own truth, who doesn't need permission to exist, begins to give off a kind of energy that goes beyond appearances. The person who no longer needs to belong in order to feel complete is no longer ruled by emotional storms. They stop trading their values just to be accepted. They no longer shrink when facing discomfort. They don't get inflated by compliments, and they don't fall apart when neglected. They have found inside themselves a source that doesn't dry up when faced with rejection, and doesn't overflow when praised by others. That kind of inner strength is rare in today's world, because in a world so sensitive to others' opinions, being free from judgment is an act of rebellion. There is something deeply powerful, even if quiet, about someone who has made peace with themselves. They don't need to talk much or persuade anyone or use tricks to get attention. Their simple presence brings calmness, not because they are perfect, but because they are no longer fighting themselves. And that peace, that calm strength that doesn't rely on anything outside, is maybe the rarest and most valuable thing today. In the energy of someone who has become whole, there is something clear and strong, even if it can't be named: integrity, truth, authenticity. From Jung's view, becoming unforgettable isn't about winning anything outside. It's the result of an inner process, the process of becoming your true self. It's not about social success. It's about the soul's growth. It means facing your own shadows bravely. It means accepting your own contradictions. It means welcoming back the parts of yourself that you once rejected. Only someone who has gone through this deep inner change, who has embraced their wounds, their darkness, their whole story, can shine with a light that doesn't blind but gently guides others. Because this real change is like turning heavy, painful rejection into the gold of self-knowledge. It's not about getting back at anyone. It's not about pride. It's about growing, about walking through the fire of being left behind and coming out more awake, more aware, more alive. It is a journey toward real freedom, where you stop living just to be chosen by others and start living to be true to yourself. And when that happens, everything else naturally follows. Because authenticity isn't something you chase after. It's something you find within. And when someone truly lives it, they become unforgettable. Not because they tried, but because truth has that much power. Real strength, the kind that doesn't need to shout or dominate, is born the moment we stop trying to prove ourselves. When we finally let go of the need to be seen, to be liked, to be validated, that's when the soul can finally breathe. And that's when others sense something in our presence that can't be explained, only felt. Jung might have described it as the turning point where the conscious self stops clinging to the masks of ego and starts aligning with a deeper, true self. It's exactly at that moment that love for ourselves no longer relies on the approval of others, and our sense of worth isn't tied to whether someone stays or goes. Inner security stops depending on outside events. It becomes rooted, sacred, unshakable. When this deep change happens, a person stops being just a social role, a personality, a projection. They become a real presence, an essence. They no longer need to prove anything, push themselves onto others, explain, or argue. There's something about the way they move through life that leaves a deep impression, even when they are silent. They don't cling. They don't beg. They don't plead for anyone to stay. But for those who find them, letting them go becomes incredibly hard. Their energy brings peace. Their truth can be felt. And their realness, in a world drowning in fake masks, becomes a quiet kind of rebellion. We live in a time where fake appearances spread quickly. Relationships break under the weight of fear. Most people are busy trying to be something for someone else instead of learning to be something for themselves. In such times, being authentic is a radical act of bravery. The person who chooses not to dress to impress, not to speak to gain approval, not to act out of fear of being alone, begins to shine with a light that was never meant to show off, and yet it shines. That light is the reflection of a soul that no longer begs for love because it has already found love inside itself, even amid noise and chaos. And most importantly, the person who becomes what no one wants to lose doesn't do it to be desired. They don't do it to grab attention. They don't do it to prove they are worth choosing. They do it because they have chosen wholeness as their way of life. Because they have realized that they don't need anyone else to choose them if they have already chosen themselves. That's when everything shifts. The energy they move through life with changes completely. Choices are no longer made from fear of being left, but from the excitement of creating, expressing, and living fully. The heart no longer begs for someone to love it, because it already holds love within. The mind no longer makes up stories to explain why someone left. All the energy that was once wasted on waiting, longing, and hoping is now turned toward growing, creating, and living a true and self-defined life. That is the new kind of strength, not the kind that controls or forces, but the kind that simply shines. Not the kind that needs to rule over others, but the kind that trusts in its own quiet, unstoppable force. Because the one who has learned to stay with themselves no longer fears losing anyone. And ironically, that is the kind of person no one wants becomes a sacred call to awaken. Carl Jung showed us that every shadow hides a truth, and every loss moves us closer to deeper connection with the self. Becoming the kind of person no one wants to lose is not about conquering the outside world. It is a quiet inner reconciliation. It is the choice to pick authenticity over approval, fulfillment over need, and truth over pretending in a world flooded with appearances. The person who validates themselves from within glows with a strength that cannot be copied. They do not chase to stay in anyone's life. They stay true to their own, and from that space of self-love, of presence, of inner depth, they quietly change everything. They turn energy into natural magnetism, pain into pure strength, and solitude into limitless freedom, because the soul is not here to please, it is here to become whole, and whoever reaches wholeness becomes unforgettable. So, remember, every time you decide to be yourself in a world that constantly invites you to pretend, you become a light of authenticity, a soul that shines without effort. You are not here to beg for love, you are here to live as love. You did not come to blend in, you came to wake up. And when you choose yourself above everything else, the entire universe slowly starts to move in your favor. If this reflection touched you, subscribe to the channel to keep exploring the deep wisdom of Carl Jung and the powerful journey of the inner self. Turn on the bell so you never miss any content that feeds your soul, and send this video to someone who needs to hear again that real wholeness always begins from within. See you on the next journey to the depths of your own becomings. To lose rejection stops being a wound and becomes simply a doorway to deeper truth.